What a handsome bunch.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Your Honor.
I think we're ready to go. I see everybody here. Mr. Court Reporter, can we go on the record, please?
We're on the record, Your Honor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning. Today is Tuesday, November 16th, 2021. It is about 11 a.m. My name is Christine Berg. I'm a public utility law judge with the Maryland Public Service Commission. We're here today for an evidentiary hearing in case number 9515D, which is captioned in the matter of the continuing investigation of the purchase gas adjustment charges of Elkton Gas Company. Can I have the appearance of counsel, please, beginning with the company?
Good morning, Your Honor. Brian Quinn on behalf of Elkton Gas.
Good morning. And for the Office of People's Counsel?
Good morning, Judge Burke. Joseph Cleaver on behalf of the Office of People's Counsel.
Good morning. And for the staff of the commission, please?
Good morning, Your Honor. Peter Wilson on behalf of the technical staff.
Good morning. Mr. Quinn, do you have any exhibits you'd like to start preliminarily with?
Nothing preliminarily, Your Honor. Elkton filed the certificate of publication for today's hearing on November 8th. So it's already in the docket, but if you'd like, we could move it I could mark it as Exhibit 1 if necessary.
Yes, please.
Okay, so please mark the certificates of publication that we filed with the commission on November 8th, noting and advertising today's hearing. Please mark those as Elkton Exhibit 1, please.
So marked. Is there any
And
objection to admitting that into the record?
No objection, Your Honor.
Thank you. OPC?
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay. That'll be marked and entered as Elkton's Exhibit 1.
thank you, Your Honor. With that, the company's prepared to call its first witness,
Okay.
unless there's anything else.
No, not that I'm aware of. And who will your first witness be?
Thank you, Your Honor. With your permission, Elkton Gas calls Jeremy Schneider to the stand.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Schneider. Can you
Good
please
morning.
raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth?
I do.
Please go ahead.
Your Honor, before we proceed, I'd also just like to make a verbal attestation pursuant to the commission's recent notice concerning virtual hearings. If now's the time to do that. Elkton will be providing 2 witnesses today virtually. On behalf of Elkton, I'd like to attest that each of the 2 witnesses are sitting alone in a separate room and not in communication with any individual while they're on the witness stand.
Thank you, Mr. Quinn.
With that, Your Honor, I'd like to proceed. Mr. Schneider, good morning.
Morning.
Mr. Schneider, do you have in front of you a document that's dated October 29th, 2021, and on its cover page, it's titled Direct Testimony of and Exhibits of Jeremy Schneider on behalf of Elkton Gas Company?
I do.
Does this document include, including the cover page, include 7 pages of question and answer testimony, and in addition a tab A, that includes 10 separate schedules labeled A through J, plus an exhibit labeled JS-1?
It does.
Was this document prepared by you or under your direct supervision?
It was.
Do you have any changes or corrections you'd like to make to this document today?
I do not.
And if I ask you these questions contained in your direct testimony today, as asked in your direct testimony, would your answers be the same?
They would.
Thank you. Your Honor, with that, would like to move Mark witness Schneider's testimony as Elkton Exhibit 2 and respectfully request that it be moved into the record.
No objection to that, Your Honor.
Mr. Schneider's testimony marked as Exhibit 2. Is there any objection to moving that into the record?
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
And that'll be admitted as Elkton's Exhibit 2.
With that, Your Honor, Mr. Schneider is available for cross-examination. Thank you.
Mr. Cleaver, do you have any questions for Mr. Schneider?
I do, Your Honor. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Schneider. My name's Joe Cleaver. I'm from the Maryland Office of People's Counsel. I don't think we've met before. And if you don't know, OPC is the statutory representative of residential ratepayers in the state. Good to see you this morning.
Hey, good morning. Good to meet you.
Could I ask you to turn to Schedule A attached to your testimony filing?
Certainly.
And let me know when you're there.
I'm there. Yep.
Okay, and if you take a look at Schedule A, you can see that the purchase gas adjustment per therm beginning October 1st is 94.4 cents per therm. Do you see that?
I do.
And that's a significant increase, would you agree, from the PGA that was effective beginning July 1st, 3 months ago. which was 57 cents a therm. Do you agree with that?
It is an increase.
And it's also an increase over the level of the PGA in October 2020, which was 52 cents a therm. Do you agree with that?
With that math, yeah, that is an increase as well.
Right. So the PGA has increased at this point in October 2021, or well, this effective October 1st, 2021 level of PGA. It's increased by about 81% from the equivalent period in 2020, from about 52 cents a therm to now 94.4 cents a therm. Would you accept that math subject to check?
Yeah, I would have to check any of this math, but off the top of my head, that makes sense.
Right. And of course, the rising gas prices are not specific to Elkton Gas. As we all know, they've been on the rise now for several months. But in light of this increase, let me ask you, could you state for the record any or describe any steps that Elkton has taken to alter its procurement practices in the face of these rising prices?
I would defer to our second witness, Will Chris. That's not my area of expertise, nor what I do on a day-to-day basis. So I couldn't provide an opinion or an educated answer on that question.
Fair enough. I'll ask Mr. Chris. And your answer may be the same for my other questions, but let me, just to make sure I don't skip asking you a question that you can answer, could you turn to Schedule B now?
Sure.
Am I understanding this schedule correctly to say that over the next 3 months, there are no purchases to be made through a fixed price contract?
I couldn't answer that question either. Anything related to gas purchasing, gas supply, energy logistics, I cannot provide an educated or honest opinion on that.
Sure, I understand. So you're here just to support the calculations, is that right?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. Your Honor, in light of that explanation, I think that all of my questions would be more appropriately posed to Mr. Chris. So with that, I don't have any further questions for Mr. Schneider.
Your Honor.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Cleaver. Mr. Wilson, do you have any questions for Mr. Schneider?
Just briefly, Your Honor. Mr. Snyder, Peter Wilson on behalf of staff. You've read Felix Patterson's testimony in this case, have you not?
Yes, sir.
And are you aware that he makes some mention of footnotes which traditionally have appeared in Elkton's filings, but as I understand it, due to a technical glitch, did not appear in those filed in this case?
Through conversation with Mr. Patterson and staff, I think it's a two-part answer there. They were included in Exhibit JS1 on the Excel document, so the digital copy. But when it was PDF'd and printed in order to file electronically with the commission, for whatever reason, the print frame cut off those footnotes, so only the actual schedules appeared. So they're there in the digital and not, I guess, technically in the filed exhibit. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that was my understanding of what happened. I just wanted to know, is that digital version, the Excel, is that available to the judge? Should she want to reference that?
To my knowledge, Mr. Quinn, when emailing the documents on October 29th, also included the electronic copy. So to my knowledge, that's also available.
Okay, so I just wanted to make that make the judge aware that that was available to, or should she want to reference it. Thank you. I don't have any other questions.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Mr. Quinn?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. I don't have any questions for Mr. Schneider at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Schneider. Next, Your Honor, Elkton would like to call its second and final witness for today, Mr. William Chris, to the stand, please.
Mr. Chris, could you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth?
I do.
Mr. Chris, good morning.
Morning.
Do you have a document in front of you that includes a cover page entitled Direct Testimony of William R. Chris on behalf of Elkton Gas Company?
I do.
Is that dated October 29th, 2021?
It is.
And does this document consist of, including the cover page, consist of 5 pages of question and answer testimony?
Yes, it does.
And was this document prepared by you or under your direct supervision?
It was.
And if I asked you the questions contained in this document today, would your answers be the same?
They would.
And do you adopt this document as your sworn testimony in this case today?
I do.
With that, Your Honor, we'd like to mark as Elkton Exhibit Number 3, the direct testimony of William R. Chris,
So marked.
and respectfully request it be moved into the evidence.
Is there any objection to moving Mr. Chris's testimony into the record?
No objection, Your Honor.
No objection, Your Honor.
His testimony will be marked and moved into the record as Elkton's Exhibit 3.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. With that, Mr. Chris is available for cross-examination by my friend, Mr. Cleaver.
Go ahead, Mr. Cleaver.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Chris. How are you?
Fine, sir. How are you today?
Fine. Nice to see you. As I said to Mr. Schneider, I don't think we've met, and I'm Joe Cleaver from the Maryland Office of People's Counsel. I had begun to ask Mr. Schneider some questions regarding the current level of the PGA. You heard me ask him to confirm that the current PGA calculation is 94.4 cents per therm, correct?
I did.
And this is higher than the PGA level from 3 months earlier in July when it was about 57 cents a therm, correct?
As you stated earlier, subject to check. Yes.
Fair enough. Thank you. And it's also higher than the PGA from the equivalent calendar period last year that became effective October 1, 2020, which was about 52 cents a therm. Would you also agree with that, subject to check?
Yes.
And as I acknowledged to Mr. Schneider, we're all aware of what's happening with gas prices, not just specific to Elkton Gas, but generally. But that said, let me ask, are you able to state or describe any measures that Elkton has taken to, with respect to its procurement practices or otherwise, to try to mitigate the effects of increasing gas costs?
Sure, I can address that. We have not taken any new specific steps that are outside of our standard procurement practices.
Okay, thank you. If you could turn to Schedule B.
I'll need some assistance for Schedule B as that is.
Schedule B, I apologize, to Mr. Schneider, attached to Mr. Schneider's testimony.
Okay. Can you tell me which page I'm looking at? I have a PDF document. Which page schedule? Let's see.
I'm looking at the PDF. It says Statement Number 1, Schedule B, at the top right, and this is an attachment immediately following Mr. Schneider's testimony. And it looks like it's the only thing that says Schedule B on it, so it's just one page according to the filing I have.
Okay. Yes, Statement 1, Schedule B, page 11.
Correct, page 11 of the PDF, right?
Yes, sir, I'm looking at that.
Okay, great. So do I understand this correctly to reflect that over the next 3 months, there are no purchases to be made through a fixed price contract?
I would restate that as we have we have not executed any purchases at a fixed price for any contract. That does not mean that when those months come around, we will not be executing any fixed price purchases. But I would agree with your statement. There are currently no executed fixed price purchases.
Okay, and October has now come and gone, and were there any fixed price purchases in October?
I will have to check. Usually every month we make a decision whether or not to execute any fixed price baseload purchases. I do not have that in front of me at this time.
Do you know one way or the other whether the company has any firm plans to execute any fixed price purchases for the remainder of November or for December of 2021?
Not for the remainder of November, but more than likely there will be some level of fixed price purchase for December, January, and February, and also likely March.
Will those purchases be made pursuant to long-term supply contracts that Elkton is presently a party to?
Can you clarify your definition of long-term supply contract?
Well, sure. You mentioned that you think it's, I think you said it was likely that, for December, January, February, that there would be some purchases made through fixed price contracts. I guess what I'm asking is, are those contracts that Elkton has already entered into, or are those future contracts that you would anticipate entering into?
Thank you for that clarification. So Elkton is currently under supply contract with its asset manager, Sequent Energy, and Elkton would utilize the AMA, Asset Management Agreement, as the umbrella supply contract to execute said purchases.
Okay. Are you able to say why there weren't any fixed price purchases made in say, October of 2021?
So in October for October, or in October for winter? For say the winter period.
Yeah, let me ask it this way. For October.
At the time, the analytical document that we were using, it did not seem reasonable to execute fixed price purchases during an already inflated period. As you've stated, the reason for increased costs is the natural gas market has seen an increase in pricing. Executing those types of purchases in October didn't seem reasonable, not to mention in October, we don't experience our full winter load. By load, I mean demand profile. A lot of folks are still reluctant to turn on their heat. So in October, there isn't much of a winter demand profile. And so locking yourself in for, a winter load profile is not something we typically do.
Is it your testimony, am I understanding you to say that the fixed prices that would be provided for under the contract would be less favorable than current market prices?
That certainly happens.
Did that happen for October?
I do not have those exact details in front of me.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chris. Staying with Schedule B here that we were just talking about, use of storage assets is another way to diversify a procurement approach, right?
Yes, sir. Exactly.
It looks like in this PGA calculation that there's no anticipation of withdrawals and storage withdrawals in November or December 2021. Is that right?
I would not say that is accurate. Although I do not know the exact level of storage withdrawals for November and December off the top of my head, I can tell you we plan although minimal, especially for November, given that it's going to be 17 to 1, and we don't want to burn through much of our fixed price storage when it's 70 degrees outside on a Wednesday in November. But there should be some level of storage withdrawal planned, or there is a level of storage withdrawal planned.
Maybe I'm missing something, but if there is some level planned and these figures here, if reflected on Schedule B, are projected, how come, for instance, when I look at December 2021, the storage use says 0 and it zeros across the line there?
I would say that's potentially an oversight.
I didn't hear that. Could you repeat what you just said?
I'm sorry, was that directed towards me or Mr. Cleaver?
I believe
you, sir.
towards
Mr.
you,
Chris.
Mr. Chris.
The fact that Schedule B shows 0 storage use in November and December of 21 could potentially be an oversight, and likely it is.
Your Honor, I have some additional questions for Mr. Chris. I'm just wondering if there's going to be a corrected series of schedules, that would affect the calculation of the PGA, and otherwise, I'm not sure if we should we postpone the hearing? Is there going to be a correction? Maybe Mr. Quinn can chime in.
Yep.
Thanks.
Happy to chime in. I believe a more accurate depiction of what those numbers mean on Schedule B, Joe, would probably be not available as opposed to 0, because those months haven't occurred yet. And the way that Elkton's PGA is set up, it's been this way for years. We've had the hearings now, and then have followed up, with, November and December, because they haven't occurred yet. So we're going to have to file, the PGA is going to be what it's going to be, when we get an order from the judge. So I'm not sure it requires a new schedule to be filed. I think a better description of those zeros are not available yet, because they're unknown. They were unknown at the time of the making of this schedule, which is back in October. And they may remain 0. So I'm not sure what filing an amended schedule now would do for the month of December, which hasn't occurred yet. But Your Honor, I'm happy to continue to discuss this.
Yeah.
Well, the witness testified that it's potentially an oversight, so there might be a change to the zeros that.
Well, I also, just so everyone knows, I did not prepare that. So I'm not familiar with the working of that document. I can tell you in my personal supply plan, which is separate from a regulatory structure, it is generally considered that there will be storage withdrawals. However, that can be challenging to forecast just given the nature of weather. And so I'm in no way am I that familiar with Schedule B. So maybe I shouldn't have said it was an oversight, since I'm not that familiar with Schedule B.
Your Honor, could I be heard?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I was basing my comment on, Mr. Chris's statement that it was an oversight, in terms of suggesting that, there may be some need for an errata or something. Based on Mr. Quinn's additional explanation, maybe there won't be a correction. I would like the opportunity, though, and maybe we can get to this at the end as a housekeeping matter. I'm wondering if there'd be an opportunity to address these issues in some kind of subsequent filing after this hearing.
Let's see where we go, and we can address that at the end.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. Thanks to Mr. Quinn. Appreciate the information.
Your Honor, just on that point, if I may, I should probably also clarify something for the record. These numbers we're talking about are for the ACA looking backward, not going forward. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. They're not projections for the future. They're going to affect, the past. Isn't that about right, Mr. Schneider?
He's
You're
muted. Mr. Schneider, you're muted.
My apologies. Correct. Yeah, so the two rates being audited during this proceeding would be the ACA rate and the supplier refund adjustment rate. So your ACA and SRA are the two items under audit at this moment.
In other words, it's a reconciliation from last year's ACA. Isn't that correct, Mr. Schneider?
Correct.
Right. Sorry to go out of turn. Thank you, Your Honor. Sorry.
Mr. Cleaver, do you have additional questions for Mr. Chris?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Mr. Chris, if I could turn to the issue of baseload purchases. And I'm looking at a staff data response. Your Honor, this was a last minute preparation. Could I was wondering if I could, I actually had someone just mark it for me. I have an exhibit. I haven't provided it, but it's a data response that all the council have seen. Is it possible to email that to Your Honor and the council right now and then share my screen? Or to have someone with screen sharing privileges share the screen so I can ask Mr. Chris a couple questions?
Everybody has seen it?
Yes, it's the response to staff data request 113. I'll send it around right now.
I have not.
I just emailed it just a second ago to Your Honor and to Mr. Wilson and Mr. Quinn.
Okay. And I may be able to share my screen.
Thank you, Your Honor. I can see that. I'm ready to proceed if Your Honor's ready.
Okay. I'm ready. Mr. Chris, can you see my screen?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Chris, I'd like to ask you some, just a couple questions about a data response. Just for the record, Judge Burke is presently showing you on her screen the company's response to staff data request 113. And if you look down at the bottom left of the narrative page, the first page of this document, you're the sponsor of this response, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. In this response, and specifically, I'm looking at the third paragraph of your answer. You explain that baseload purchases are determined by first calculating a linear regression using the daily demand data from the prior year, and then forecast daily demand using a normalized regression based on the 10-year average weather. Did I read that correctly?
You did.
Okay, and could you just, for the record, just explain what baseload purchases are?
Certainly. So baseload purchases represent a fixed daily volume that is purchased before the start of a month. So we are in November. So in October, towards the end of the month, we would have performed this calculation of a linear regression to get a daily load profile. And we would have determined a reasonable level of supply that Elkton Gas customers would consume every day of the month. And that would be priced at a fixed price inside for first of the month for the entire month. So we're talking about selecting a fixed volume at a fixed price for the entire duration of the month. And it's important, you know, that my last sentence in that paragraph is the decided volume should accommodate daily swings in temperature to avoid unnecessary sales of the baseload during warm periods. As I alluded to earlier, you know, this morning it was 32 degrees and tomorrow it's going to be 70 degrees. You know, so you will have varied fluctuations in temperature. And the last thing I would want to do is to obligate through a high base load volume the ratepayers of Elkton to supply that they don't need at a fixed price. Because sometimes, you know, depending on market sentiment, there, although I cannot speak to any specifically, just generally speaking, I have seen inside FERC fixed prices start out high and be high for the entire month, and yet daily prices come in lower than that fixed price. And that would be, you know, an unfavorable situation. And so setting a baseload purchase volume is at risk of being too casual. It's a blend of art and science. You know, the linear regression says one thing, experience tells me another, and so setting that baseload volume is a judgment call based on data, obviously.
Thank you. And how are the baseload prices determined? Can you explain that?
So those are index prices determined by you know, supply, demand, market liquidity of the natural gas market. That is a published inside FERC are published monthly indexes, generally accepted by all industry participants.
And your testimony is that, if I understood your answer to the previous two questions ago, your testimony is that the company doesn't want to purchase too high a percentage of baseload, doesn't want too much of its, you know, total power source to be too much to be too high a percentage of a baseload purchase because there's the possibility that the index prices could go down over the course of the month. Is that right?
Yes, it's not just pricing, but although that is a critical component, but it's also you know, for temperature, because we don't want to have gas that we don't need as well.
I understand. was there anything about current market conditions that, you know, led to a conclusion on the part of the company that spot market prices were more or less likely to be lower than, you know, to decline over the subsequent month, than they otherwise, you know, normally would be?
Um, the it is not our role to speculate prices. That is outside the function of a utility, or at least that is our that is the guidance that I have in consultation with my my regulatory group and management. We are not speculators, and so I do not make decisions based on I do not make complete decisions based on where I think prices will be. And so, no, I do not necessarily, although I might consider it, and if I have to choose between buying 600 or 400, I might choose 500. Or if I think 500 is the right number, I mean, it's possible that I might err on one side or the other, but generally speaking, we do not speculate pricing and make our decisions accordingly.
Okay. Does the determination of how much baseload power to purchase, is that made on a monthly basis?
Yes. Every month, before the start of every month, we have a spreadsheet like I stated, that uses a linear regression based on daily demand.
Okay. And could you, Judge Burke, could you please, Your Honor, scroll to the next page? Mr. Chris, this next page that Her Honor just scrolled down to, that's the attachment to your response. Do you recognize this?
Yes, Mr. Cleaver, I do.
And this first column has the amount of the baseload purchases and then the percentage of the total portfolio that comprises. Do you see that?
I do.
And it looks like down at the bottom, the annual percentage of baseload, and this is also reflected in the narrative part of your answer, is 32% for the October 20 through September 21 period. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Is the, and I think you've explained this, but could you just state it again in response to the question? Could you explain why from April 21 through September 21 there were no baseload purchases made?
April through September is traditionally the storage injection season. And it's also, generally speaking, a period of lower volatility. It's not necessary to lock in volume for a fixed price, especially when Elkton is making purchases for injections into storage.
Okay, thank you. Is there at the end of a year, when you look back, is there an ideal percentage that Elkton has that, when you look back at what you were required to purchase in spot markets versus, obtaining from storage versus baseload purchases, is there, when you look at the baseload purchase at the end of a 12-month period, is there an ideal percentage that the company believes is appropriate looking backwards?
There is no formal number that we have been directed or internally have. I can tell you that in managing the supply for Maryland, Sandpiper, and Delaware, You know, 50%, you know, I certainly would not want to exceed 50% of a fixed price. Just so, you know, just in my experience, that gives me enough flexibility. As you can see on the day ahead sales portion, which is to the far right, there was only, you know, in March of 21, out of 31,000 of base load and 34,000 of day ahead purchases, I only needed to sell gas back into the market of 500 DTs. And as you can also see in October, we only base loaded 28%, whereas once we get to November through March, that percentage goes up to approximately 40-ish%. And I feel like that accurately reflects my answers to you that, you know, we want to stay less than 50 as a general, you know, as a general thought process. And especially in October, I certainly don't want to base load too much because, you know, again, folks are still considering whether or not to turn on their heat. We call it a shoulder month. It's not quite cold enough for the heat to be on all the time. And I certainly don't want to be selling gas that I've financially obligated the ratepayers to, which is why, you know, I certainly don't want to, I want that day ahead sales column to be 0 if at all possible.
Thank you, Mr. Chris. Just one more question or two on this. Would you accept subject to check that for the 12-month period beginning in October 2019, going through September 2020, so the 12 months before the 12 months, immediately before the 12 months on this chart we're looking at, the annual baseload purchase figure was 44%. Would you accept that subject to check?
Yes, sir. That seems reasonable.
And so is that, you know, difference of, you know, 44% in the previous 12-month period to 32% here, are you saying that that's largely due to weather factors? I mean, is that the primary reason that when you during each month when the company made a decision of the amount of baseload power to purchase, that based on weather projections, it just so happened that these 12 months, that the total at the end it ended up being 32%, but in the previous 12 it was 44?
I'm not sure I would want to agree with that, although I recognize I said I would agree to the percentage. I would want to see how that percentage was calculated because, as I mentioned, in this schedule, as you correctly pointed out, there are 0 baseload volumes in April to September. But I also stated that Elkton has gas going into storage. And so although someone can consider storage volumes for injection to be base load supply. And so it could be if in that particular schedule, if storage injections were included in base load supply, that could be the possibility. As to why the base load percentage is higher.
Okay, but you don't know one way or the other why the previous 12 was about a third higher than these 12 months we're looking at here.
No, and we also purchased Elkton in August of 20, and so there's a large period of time that gas procurement activity was not under my purview.
Understood. Thank you, Mr. Chris. I don't have any further questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cleaver.
I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. Mr. Wilson, do you have any questions for Mr. Chris?
No, I don't, Your Honor.
I do not either. I don't have any other questions.
No redirect, Your Honor. Thank you.
Do you have any other witnesses, Mr. Quinn, or evidence?
No, Your Honor. I'm all out of witnesses. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Cleaver, do you have any evidence or witnesses that you would like to present?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Wilson?
Yes, Your Honor. Staff would call our only witness, Felix Patterson.
Mr. Patterson, can you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth? I can't hear you, so maybe you're muted. There you go.
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Patterson, could you state your full name and your position with the commissioner for the record, please?
My name is Felix L. Patterson, and I'm Senior Utility Auditor for the State of Maryland Public Service Commission.
And in that capacity, did you produce and cause to be filed written direct testimony and exhibits dated November 16th, 2021 as mail log 237780?
Yes, I did.
And Your Honor, at this time, I would ask that Mr. Patterson's testimony, mail log 237780, be marked as staff exhibit 1 for identification.
That'll be marked.
Mr. Patterson, do you have any corrections or additions to your testimony?
No, I do not.
And is your testimony, staff exhibit 1, true and correct as of today to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, with that, I would move for the admission of staff exhibit 1 and offer the witness for questioning.
Thank you. Is there any objection to Mr. Patterson's testimony being entered into the record?
No objection, Your Honor.
No objection, Your Honor.
That'll be marked and entered as staff's exhibit 1. Mr. Cleaver, do you have any questions for Mr. Patterson?
Good morning, Mr. Patterson. No, Your Honor, no questions. Thank you.
Good morning.
Mr. Quinn, do you have any questions?
No, thank you. Good morning, Felix. No, thank you. No questions, Your Honor.
Good morning.
Mr. Patterson, good morning. I did have one question as to page 9 of your testimony, line 17. Your testimony says that this factor was designed to recover an undercollection from last year's case. Was last year's case a refund for an overcollection or a recover for undercollection?
Recover for undercollection.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. I don't have any other questions for Mr. Oh, actually I do. I'm sorry. Mr. Patterson, there were 2 changes that the company, or 2 errors that you noticed when you did the audit for the case to Schedule B and Schedule C. It's clear from your testimony that Schedule B, the staff's in agreement with that being accounted for in the next quarterly filing. As to the charges in Schedule C, the nominal amount, does staff also agree with the proposal to carry that to the next quarterly filing?
Yes.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions. Does anyone have questions in light of my questions?
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
Are there any other issues or any other witnesses that anybody has to offer?
Not from staff.
Okay, Mr. Cleaver, do you want to revisit your earlier issue?
Your Honor, what? Yes, thank you. Also, there's a housekeeping matter I'll address. I was just curious whether Your Honor would entertain any kind of written submission following the hearing.
At a brief a written
Yeah,
submission
I guess it.
in
it
what
would-
regard?
A brief would be would I think make the most sense. I'm just yeah, a very short brief.
Is there any objection from the other parties?
Your Honor, thank you. It's Brian Quinn. I understand Mr. Cleaver's late to the case here today, sitting in for another OPC. You know, if OPC had issues with any particular item, they were free to submit testimony, call a witness of their own, and proffer any discussion of issues they had. Now at the end of the case, seeking to file a brief on some unknown matter just causes me a little bit of agita, but I'm not clear, you know, if what the issues might be and why they weren't developed more fully during the evidentiary phase of this case is my only comment.
Your Honor, if I understand Mr. Quinn's points. They're fair points. If I may, could OPC reserve the right to move for a request to move for authorization to file a brief, and if we did file such a motion, we would file it by close of business tomorrow. I just don't know, Your Honor, as Mr. Quinn pointed out, I am late to the case. I don't want to make an excuse. I'd like the opportunity to go back and look at my notes and think about whether, you know, we even want to address any of the issues. But there are some issues that obviously I thought required some questioning. I don't know that they rise to the level of requiring a brief or that OPC needs to state a position, but I would like the opportunity to, now that I've had the chance to hear from the witnesses, to think about that and then potentially request authorization to file something. I know that's unusual, but I don't.
Mr. Wilson, do you have any?
It could be moot, I guess is what I'm saying. So I don't know that we need to, force Your Honor to make a decision today as to whether or not somebody can file a brief. I would like the opportunity to go back and review the responses to the questions and then make a decision as to whether we think we need to say something.
Mr. Wilson, do you have any position?
Yes, I do, Your Honor. I have to agree with Mr. Quinn on this, that I'm not sure what a brief would entail here. I'm not sure what the question is. And this is an ongoing process with quarterly filings and another case next year. And I think if there's any problem comes to light, that that's the method that it'll be straightened out. But we really don't have any evidence there is a problem. So OPC didn't do any discovery in this case. And so I'm just at a loss to know exactly what OPC is looking for in a brief.
I tend to agree. So I'm going to deny the request. If there were issues as far as, and I have a sense of what the issues might be, but it seems to me that they might be forward-looking issues, not, this is a reconciliation of past. And I don't see at this point the necessity of going into that with regard to this case today. Perhaps maybe in the next period of reporting. So at this time, I'm going to deny your request, Mr. Cleaver.
Understood, Your Honor. Just so I'm clear, if OPC ultimately determines that we think that there's some issue with certain procurement practices, Your Honor is saying that you think the appropriate vehicle to raise those concerns would be in connection with the next filing in 3 months? Is that I just want to make sure I'm understanding what Your Honor is saying about that.
I guess they would. I'm not. No. I would say in the next year, in the next true up at the next ACA hearing, the OPC has the right to appeal any order if you feel that certainly that the findings are not appropriate. You can appeal my order and proceed that way. If you disagree.
Understood, Your Honor. If in that case, just to preserve appeal rights, I would just note for the record, if I could just have your indulgence for 1 moment, Your Honor. I would just state for the record that OPC does not agree that, based on the evidence that's been adduced, that within the meaning of PUA 4402C3, the company has shown that its practices in procuring and purchasing fuel were reasonable. And I'll leave it at that, but I'd like to state that on the record, Your Honor. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything else from either of the parties?
No, Your Honor.
Your Honor, obviously the company disagrees and objects to Mr. Cleaver's statement and asks for the support for it, but just for the record, would like to object to that statement by Mr. Cleaver. All due respect to him. And with that, nothing else. Thank you very much, Your Honor.
Thank you. I think that concludes our hearing for today. Anything else? No,
Your Honor.
No.
Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor.
all.
You
Bye.
can go off the record.
Off the record, Your Honor, thank you.